So, Argylle is a 2.5 hour spy romp, just a little shorter than 2.5 hours. The movie stars Bryce Dallas Howard as a young, affable, well, not that young actually. Let's say indoorsy sort of writer, maybe a little shy. She's got a successful book series called Argylle, based on a spy, a world-renowned globetrotter that looks an awful lot like Henry Cavill. Argylle is a fiction of our writer's imagination. Ellie Conway is her name. Sorry, I was just struggling to come up with it. He's a fiction of Ellie's imagination, or at least she thinks so, up until one day when she's on a train, desperate to get out of the city, get out of her own head, and she meets Sam Rockwell, a very real spy, who tells her that the events in her Argylle series are not just fiction, but are real and actually happen, and that there's a whole organization out there, a dark sector, deep op, foreign nation, whatever, led by Bryan Cranston, called The Division, who wants to get Ellie's next chapter from her and find out what's going to happen so they can get the nuclear codes or acquire the device that they need to change the world and make the bomb that'll blow up the whatever, right? It is a meditation on all things spy and espionage and spycraft. It's much like James Bond. It's actually why Vaughn wanted Henry Cavill, because he was in the running for James Bond. It was very much supposed to be kind of this doubtful thing, but with all the flash and flare of a Matthew Vaughn project a la Kingsman, right? Kingsman, the Secret Service. I watched Argylle. I'm curious to hear what you think. Andy, what did you think about Argylle?
So I've heard a lot of kind of mixed reviews, mostly kind of negative about this. Went with an open mind because it's got a lot of stars that I'm interested in. Of course, Henry Cavill, Dua Lipa, John Cena is in it. It's a great cast. Sam Rockwell, Samuel L. Jackson, everyone you want to see in a movie. And I was kind of with it for about halfway. It's a little bit of an action comedy, kind of fish out of water thing going on. But then it gets really kind of weird, like halfway through. And by the end, like Act 3, it is so bizarre that I'm just blown away that anyone allowed this on screen. Like, who read this script? What executive took a look at this and said, yeah, that this is the one, this is the thing. Man, none of this works. And like the spy stuff doesn't work. The action doesn't work. The comedy doesn't work. The reveals are eye rolling. They're not surprises at all. It doesn't seem like the stars are on board. They're all playing these kind of one-dimensional characters. Stuff that's funny is not supposed to be funny. Effects look bad. This is a $200 million movie, and somehow it looks awful. So we got a lot to get into. There are some good things about it, like most movies, but man, it was a lot worse than I thought.
You know, Argylle's been in a frustrating place, I think, in theaters, at least here in the U.S., because we've all seen the same trailer for Argylle for like 4 months. It has been in theaters. We have seen it so many times. I've been saying for months this movie desperately needs a new trailer. And it hasn't gotten one, which is weird because the trailer, I think, probably tested well in test audiences because it shows the whole movie, right? It tells you a lot about what's going to be in it. It teases up some good people who are going to be in it, right? Some good casting, maybe some fun ideas. Henry Cavill's god-awful haircut. And I thought maybe that this would turn into something bigger. In fact, we just talked about, I think on the show last week, there was a rumor that the trailer only shows like the first half hour of the movie and that there's so much more there. I mean, it even teases, right? Once you know the secret, the trailer's got it in big font on there. Like it's a big deal going to see what Argylle is. And it's almost advertised more like a blind box feature. Like you don't really know what you're getting into. So buy a ticket now and come see. And it is like really frustrating to have to get on here and tell you what you're getting is bad. And I think they knew it was bad and they ran with it because it cost Apple $200 million and they're not going to get out and say, hey, this is a dud, of course. But I think they gave Matthew Vaughn a lot of money to do something fun with this Jason Fuchs script. He certainly had his fun with it. But boy, it is not better for it. And I'm not better for watching it. It's a big miss. So let's talk about why. Let's talk about what doesn't work in the movie. Maybe some things that do, right? And ultimately whether or not it is worth anybody's time. Because I do wonder if there's an audience out there for Argylle. I'm really not so sure. So let's start, I think, with kind of the frame of the trailer, the thing everybody would know if you've seen this. This is kind of what I've just explained previous, but Ellie Conway is a writer, right? She's struggling to come up with the ending for her next book. She takes a trip out of town. She meets Sam Rockwell, who's a spy. He tells her, hey, all the stuff you're writing is really true. We got to get out of here and hit the road. Bring that fuzzy cat along with you, and we'll do our thing. And then they dive into the world of espionage to meet people like Samuel L. Jackson and Bryan Cranston, and hopefully get the next chapter out of Ellie and find out who the real Argylle is. Already on its face, this is a confusing plot. I mean, it seems straight up, but I mean, just the idea of that Argylle isn't a real person, but they are, and we don't know who it is, even though it looks like Henry Cavill, but it may not be, is already kind of strange. And the movie, for like the first third, I think actually kind of threads the needle. For the first act of this movie, I thought, you know what? Maybe this is doing something clever. Maybe this is doing something unique. Maybe this is doing something different. And it's really frustrating to find out that like it so isn't. It starts to reach for that, and then it just falls off and falls into this like terrifying rut of boredom and like placidity that doesn't produce any real sensation of fun. Even the stuff that's supposed to be fun just falls flat, because I think like the movie tries to prop up all of these goals on its characters that we have to find out who Argylle is, and we have to find out if this is true, and is Sam Rockwell real, or is he just being a spy who's lying to Ellie Conway? Like, it doesn't give anybody any good motivations. And by the time you get to like the third act, you kind of just don't care about anybody. You end up being really detached from your characters on screen. It's difficult for me to care about what's happening with Sam Rockwell. It's difficult for me to care about what's happening with the cat in the Cat Pack, because I've seen it in trailers for 4 months. Did you have the same sensation about this? Like, I just could not have cared less about these people.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of bored through a lot of it. I was with it for like the first act. It is an interesting start. I think Sam Rockwell's the best actor in this movie. He's a lot of fun. He's putting in a lot of work to this character that has no right to deserve it. It's a lot of nuance. It's a lot of fun. He's trying to make all of it work. The action, the comedy, the romance. He's the only person I'm convinced by. I feel like Bryce Dallas Howard is really miscast, because this is kind of an action comedy, and she's fine as long as she doesn't have to really do the action or the comedy. Like, she was fine in Jurassic World, where she just kind of has to run and scream. Just kind of miscast in this. And like I said, everyone else is just hired because of who they are, and you instantly recognize John Cena and Henry Cavill and Samuel L. Jackson, and they're just phoning it in on set for like a day, maybe two, mostly. But the initial plot where it's like, oh, you're people are after you. I'm a spy. I'm going to protect you. We got to get away, and they're kind of on the run for a little bit. This part works, but when we get to some of the reveals that happen early on, it's just kind of eye rolling, and it's not convincing, and it reaches like Austin Powers level absurdity, but not in a good way.
Yeah, it's an odd script from Jason Fuchs. Like, because when you're writing a movie, what's the best way to frame this? When you're watching a movie about a writer who's struggling to write something new, like, you have to remember that the script you're seeing was written by somebody, and the screenplay is written by somebody. So in a lot of ways, it's a writer writing about their own struggles, right? And like, I thought about that watching this. This is kind of a meta commentary from Fuchs about writing spies and why it's difficult, and why there has to be all these double crosses and triple crosses and secret agent and super secret agent and secret organizations. It gets complicated and it gets messy. And I feel like Vaughn approached this script with a big budget and big ideas and a big cast and big goals for like what he was going to build with it. And I feel like visually, a lot of that plays good. If there's sequences in Argylle that you could basically watch on mute or with just music, and you'd be like, yeah, okay, all right, we're in this palace and we're going somewhere, and there's this big flashy CGI thing. Like, that stuff would work, but like, boy, you just don't care by the time you get there, you know, like, because the script is too loose with, I think, how characters interact with one another, and there's a couple of good surprises, but I do think, for what it's worth, like, the $200 million this film cost is on screen. At least you could see it. You could see it in its casting. You can see it in its big effects. Where you could certainly see it in its music, which I thought was interesting. One of the odd things about this, Argylle is the only film that has the rights to the Beatles song Now and Then, which is prominently featured in the movie. That's that new Beatles track that came out like 2 months ago when everybody was like, oh yeah, the Beatles got one more song thanks to Peter Jackson isolating John Lennon's vocals, and this is the song they never released. Yeah, Vaughn locked down the rights to that like a year ago because he was working with Giles Martin, who was the son of the Beatles producer, and that's the song prominently featured in here. And let me tell you, even watching it in theaters, you'd think I would have had some feeling of elation of listening to like a final Beatles track, but no, it's kind of a B-side, and it's really not that much of a banger for your $200 million film. Kind of an odd thing, but like I said, clearly they knew they had money and they were going to spend it. By God, they were going to get Samuel L. Jackson watching the Lakers in Argylle. I just don't think it doesn't channel into anything remotely interesting.
You know, Apple has really deep pockets. They can play by different rules, but this is 3 films in a row that they've come out that have kind of bombed. Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, and now Argylle. And they're spending, $200 million, and the studios love it. It's good for the business. It's good for theaters to have something to come out because we are in a really dry season right now. But they need to get some traditional theater executives in there at Apple to be like, okay, we're not going to spend $200 million on a movie that comes out in February. Like, that is summer blockbuster kind of spending. Let's pare this down. Let's tighten up this script. There is something here. There are some ideas that on paper could work. It's the execution that is so unbelievably bad. And man, I just couldn't believe, like, in the third act, I was like, I can't believe that this is actually happening right now. It's only February. This might be a Razzie worthy film.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted to give it credit, like, oh, well, maybe it's being self-aware, and like it kind of is, but it also like falls on the same grenades that so many like cheesy, lame spy movies do. That like it ends up being more of a cheesy, lame spy movie than a meditation on cheesy, lame spy movies. Like it ends up falling for the trap I think it's trying to set on its audiences, and it just doesn't come together into anything really stellar. I do want to say, for what it's worth, there are some things that I think are good in Argylle. A lot of the kinetic action, the hand-to-hand choreograph stuff is pretty good, right? Like Sam Rockwell fighting a bunch of dudes on a train while a camera's like whipping around. Like, that's fun. That's a good time. Additionally, I think there's some decent laughs. Like it doesn't all work, but every once in a while you'll get something goofy. It's so stupid. Is a scene in the third act where Bryan Cranston's like trying to watch this whole scenario happen in this smoke-filled room on a screen, and the camera cuts to him, and he's like, I can't see anything, and it just cuts back to the screen. It's just solid smoke. Like, funny. I laughed. Stupid. Not all bangers, but also like there's a lot of bad CGI. There's a lot of bad one-liners that don't land. There's a lot of time when you're going to be checking your watch or thinking you should go to the bathroom. Tragically underdeveloped Argylle, I think, or
so
overdeveloped.
Long.
Yeah.
It's 2 hours, 20 minutes. Some of the action reminds me of things I've seen in like James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. There's a sequence in there where Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn has a big fight scene down a hallway, and there's like animation happening on top of the actual action, and it's an amazing blend of action and style and animation. And I feel like this is trying to do some of that same stuff, and it just doesn't work because it looks so bad.
Yes.
And it's so unconvincing. But if you want a comparison of what it's trying to do, it's something like that style of action. It just is not executed very well.
Yeah. Also worth mentioning when that scene happens, and it's Birds of Prey, right? That big Harley fight scene with the flowers. I'm thinking of. I think Birds of Prey.
The Suicide Squad.
The Suicide Squad. I'm pretty sure that's in like the first half hour of the movie. Like, so it's more of a flourish, whereas in this, it's like supposed to be, I think, one of the big numbers. And it's like, oh boy, this isn't landing the way I think it's supposed to. Any other thoughts, Andy, before we wrap up our review on Argylle?
No, I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Argylle?
I'm going to give a rare hard pass.
Rare hard pass.
Do not watch. This is going to be coming to Apple TV Plus at some point. skip it. I wouldn't even say save it for streaming. It is so long. It's so boring. Just look up the highlights in 6 months if you're that interested in it. Man, it is such a miss. It is beyond what I thought. It might be the worst movie of the year, and we're only 2 months in, eight
Yeah,
weeks into the new year.
Andy and I have a loose best of and worst of the year like list running throughout the year, and I think we both need to get on to slap Argylle on there somewhere. It's not great, folks. Would pass, I think. Andy's right. Like if it was on streaming, I'd say maybe. It's just too long. God, it's nearly 3 hours. Like I know it's 2 hours 20, but like come on, you're not far off. Even if you're gonna take the time, you're gonna get bored. Like it's. God, I so wanted to get on here and tell you that it's subversive or it's a cult classic or yeah, it's only got a 32 on Rotten, but that's only because a third of audiences really get it, man. But like, no, dude, it's bad. It's bad. Argylle's not great. It's a bummer. I'm really hoping Vaughn changes directions here. I was telling Andy before we got started that like, it seems like his intention is to make a few different franchises and then have them all cross over into one, right? Do a couple Kingsman things, maybe do something over here, some kind of cool mashup movie. And normally I love the idea of that, but in the case of Argylle, my man, stay away. Just act like this one didn't happen. Move it along. It'll be fun to watch Henry Cavill show up in another movie someday if he ever does end up tying them together somehow, but I can't say, well, any of us will be better for it, and it certainly won't make me want to go back and revisit Argylle. So with that, we should move on to some more exciting things, something to look forward to, right? Not looking back, looking ahead. And we can do that when we look at the big game, right? Andy, what do we call this segment?
It's time for the trailer park